So you all know by Combinator, Gary Tan actually went to something called the Network State Conference, because every year they have a conference where they talk about this stuff for like 9 hours straight, and said that what happened in San Francisco had been an expression of the network state ideology, and crowed about the fact that Elon Musk capturing X was another big victory for this movement. And Tan claims to be a Democrat. And how is a Democrat happy that Elon Musk captured X, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, he just made this about the network state. And so then I really started taking it seriously. And I wrote a 5-part series for the New Republic about this network state ideology. But what I didn't know then was that the rabbit hole went even deeper than I thought.
Christine, do you remember when technology was exciting?
Yeah, remember when Facebook debuted? Maybe what was that, freshman year of college for me? And you would take your digital camera and plug it into the computer and just create an album.
Was Facebook exciting? I don't know. I was out of college when that came out, so it was fun for me for like 2 minutes when I was catching up on old high school friends, and I was like, oh, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, the algorithm quickly took over. And
I remember getting
bad.
my first smartphone.
Oh, really?
That probably set me down the path of coming out as trans, actually.
How so?
Well, that's when I joined Twitter and I learned that trans women were actually cool and could be successful, maybe.
That was when Twitter was good.
And now Twitter is bad and is owned by a fascist.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, who are we canceling today?
We are canceling the Nerd Reich.
The Nerd Reich. That sounds like the title of a book I read recently.
Mm-hmm.
Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin Burns.
And I'm Christine Grimaldi.
And you're listening to Cancel Me Daddy,
the show where we take a closer look at all the panic around political media.
With thoughtful analysis.
And verbal shitposting.
So we kind of teased it in the lead, but we have a very exciting show today. We are talking to author and journalist Gil Durán, and he has just released a new book called The Nerd Reich. And it's all about how like our tech billionaire overlords are all turning fascist at seemingly the same time.
Mm-hmm. And this goes back longer than we thought it did.
Yeah.
But it's been particularly pronounced since the last presidential election.
Let's get into it with Gil. Gil, welcome to Cancel Me Daddy.
Thanks for having me.
We're very excited about your book. This is an area that we've been covering on this show for a very long time. So you certainly fit in with the theme of what we're doing here. You know, I've been reading up on your book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but what is the network state and why are so many tech billionaires sort of obsessed with it?
The network state is this cultish idea that in the 21st century, Silicon Valley billionaires will take control of the planet and completely change the way it's governed. And they'll get rid of democracy, essentially. It comes from this 2022 book called The Network State, How to Start a New Country, which is free to read online. You can search it, you'll find it. There's a 1-sentence version, a 1-paragraph version, a 1-page version, and then a 400-page version that spells out this fantasy of how the United States will collapse and be replaced by basically tech authoritarian government, or government by corporation at the very least. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a very strange, fringe, niche idea until you realize that we're starting to see this idea tried all around the world. There's actually a venture capital firm, Pronomos Capital, that is funding these projects all over the world. There's a plan to build one at Greenland if Donald Trump takes Greenland. There's a proposal to build one on the ruins of genocide in Gaza. Donald Trump even tweeted a AI-generated video showing a Trump casino and resort on the beach in Gaza with money raining from the sky and Elon Musk hanging out with scantily clad women. There's a prototype project in Honduras called Prospera, where some billionaires bought some land on an island off of Honduras and are trying to have their own regime with their own rules and regulations. And Donald Trump has said he's going to create 10 new freedom cities on federal land. And these would be corporate new cities that are built. And so we're seeing this idea pop up. But for instance, the freedom cities were in Trump's 2024 campaign platform.
Mhm.
And while it was mentioned, the idea in like Politico and other news outlets, to this day, no one has really explained what is a freedom city? Why do we need freedom cities? And where does the idea come from? It comes from this network state book, which is itself sort of an expression of a much bigger idea that is really what my book is about.
What inspired you to write this book? Can you give us like an overview of what led you to this point and where you found yourself?
I was in San Francisco in 2021 as the editorial page editor of the San Francisco Examiner. And there were these 4 recall elections targeting progressive politicians that year. And I covered those as a journalist. And it was interesting to me because recall elections are these special elections you can have in California and some other places where if people get mad at a politician, they can sign a petition and then there can be an election if enough people agree to it to pull that politician from office before their full term is up. And successful recall elections are pretty rare because people have to be pretty upset and it takes a lot of money to really mount a successful campaign. But in this case, San Francisco recalled 4 progressive politicians in 1 year in a campaign that was funded by a very strange alliance that I had never seen before. A right wing Republican billionaire and San Francisco venture capitalists, some of whom claimed to be Democrats, poured millions of dollars into a full suite campaign that had a propaganda engine making everybody feel like the city would be doomed forever if they didn't get rid of these politicians. And also, entire new organizations were funded just to start pushing for these recalls. And at the time, I knew something was wrong because I spent most of my career in Democratic establishment politics as a strategist and communicator. I'm considered pretty good at that stuff, even though I went back to journalism because that was really my calling in life. But I couldn't quite put my finger on what is this weird thing that I hadn't seen before. Basically, I saw something I hadn't seen before, and I got very curious about what that was. And it took me a while to put my finger on it. But there was a woman here in San Francisco, Emily Mills, and she was sort of an activist against the recalls on Twitter. And she started doing these long threads spelling out some of the stuff these guys were saying in podcasts and talking about this idea called the network state and all the weird connections that this billionaire Peter Thiel seemed to have to what was going on in San Francisco. And at first I thought that was pretty weird. I could tell she wasn't lying. It was accurate stuff, but I couldn't really relate to what did this have to do with that. But I kept thinking about it, and I came across a book review for a book by a historian named Quinn Slobodian called Crack Up Capitalism, which I highly recommend to anybody who wants to know more about this stuff. And Slobodian writes about this long running dream of billionaires to build these special zones where they can essentially escape democracy and live free of any rules, laws, regulations, taxes, make their own rules. And in that book, Slobodian talks about the network state as a new iteration of this. And then I realized, wait, people know about this? This is real? And from there, I just started doing a really deep dive, read the book, Network State, listening to podcasts, did everything I could to gather the information and realized that what we had seen in San Francisco was not an accident or coincidence or happenstance. The Silicon Valley people funding that had a very specific idea of what the future was going to be. And in fact, Gary Tan, who's the president of this startup accelerator called Y Combinator, this place Sam Altman used to run that
Oh,
launched a
we've
bunch
talked
of
about that.
We've had
Yeah.
an episode
Okay.
about that, yeah.
So you all know by Combinator, Gary Tan actually went to something called the Network State Conference because every year
Uh-huh.
they have a conference where they talk about this stuff for like 9 hours straight and said that what happened in San Francisco had been an expression of the network state ideology and crowed about the fact that Elon Musk capturing X was another big victory for this movement. And Tan claims to be a Democrat. And how is a Democrat happy that Elon Musk captured X, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, he just made this about the network state. And so then I really started taking it seriously. And I wrote a 5-part series for the New Republic about this network
Mhm.
state ideology. But what I didn't know then was that the rabbit hole went even deeper than I thought.
How is Peter Thiel involved with this? Because, I primarily cover for my career, I cover like trans issues is what I'm known
Mhm.
for. And I remember Peter Thiel being the guy who like pulled a new HQ out of North Carolina after the bathroom bill debacle back in 2016. So how do we get to this point now where Peter Thiel is like, quite frankly, one of the most terrifying political actors in the world. Like he took down Gawker, and now he's founding these really shadowy companies. He has land in Argentina, which is a classic fascist move. Is he the linchpin of this, or is he just another player in all of this?
I see him as the key player. My book focuses very much on what I consider a cult of apocalypse capitalism that has been largely pushed by Peter Thiel, who back in the late 90s was inspired by a book called The Sovereign Individual, which predicted that in the 21st century, technology would basically overthrow and end democracy. And really, the people I write about, they are all, if you look at who they are, they're all somehow very closely connected to Thiel. And I didn't realize that at first. I kind of feel stupid now. Gary Tan was Palantir employee number 10. Peter Thiel co-founded Palantir. And he even designed the Palantir logo. And before he pivoted to being the political bully of San Francisco, he spent a lot of time tweeting admiringly of Peter Thiel, right? Like literally just posting his quotes on Twitter, and had a whole video about how Peter Thiel was like the most important person in his world, and he missed the chance to become a founder of Palantir, and learned basically never ignore what Peter Thiel tells you. And on and on and on. Sam Altman, Balaji Srinivasan, who wrote the Network State book, the first major investor in his genomics company, Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin, who I'm sure you all are familiar with, this Peter Thiel's fascist political guru, was also funded by Thiel. And then Thiel spreads this around to other people like Mark Andreessen. And, they all become major promoters of this stuff. So in his 2014 book, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel extols the values, the virtues of forming a cult. He says that cults are organizations of total dedication. And if you want to start a real company that's going to do stuff, you got to model it after a cult or a mafia. Well, Peter Thiel's the head of the so-called PayPal mafia. So this idea that you get a cohesive and zealous group of people together and form this cult that pushes an idea into the mainstream is very much what I think has happened. And that's why Peter Thiel is really the center of my book, and the prophecy of the decline of democracy that he believes he has been chasing, and that he is trying to make into a self-fulfilling prophecy here in the 2026, 2027 range. So
I think a point you make pretty early on in the book is that they're all guys, right? And are they all or predominantly white men? And following up on that, white women are like central to the cause of white supremacy. Have there been any women involved in this project of the network state?
Yeah, most of the women they've recruited into that are at very junior levels. Like they get to be the young, happy-looking model in the video, trying to get everybody to come join this network school. Because as we all know, one of the big problems these guys have is getting any woman voluntarily to participate in any of their schemes. Sometimes they post images of their meetings online, and it's like all dorky guys, And so they're always trying to get a few token women in there to make it seem edgy and cool and hot to be involved in this stuff. But it's really not realistic. Catherine Boyle, who is at Andreessen Horowitz. She's one of the partners of Andreessen Horowitz, and is someone who got into venture capital because of, drum roll please, Peter Thiel. And she has been out there really harshly spouting a lot of this stuff and trying to do the whole, white woman as the avatar of authoritarian militaristic power. And in fact, she's credited with being the designer of a whole project at A16Z to accelerate Silicon Valley's investment in military and AI and surveillance. And she calls it American dynamism. So that's one of their few sort of mascot characters. But for the most part, it's men, it's white men, it's wealthy white men. And that is very much, as we all know, the hierarchy they wish to see in the world.
My favorite story from our Sam Altman episode was an anecdote from page 6 where Jeremy O. Harris, the playwright, walked up to Sam Altman at an Oscars party and called him Joseph Goebbels to his face. And then the reporter followed up for clarification, and Jeremy Harris said something to the effect of, "Oh, I was drinking. I wasn't really in my right mind. I really meant Friedrich Flick." The other Nazi. And that's when page 6 gave us like the greatest sentence of all time, which was talk about splitting hairs.
Well, Sam Altman met his husband in Peter Thiel's
In Peel's
hot
hot
tub.
tub.
Yeah.
And Peter Thiel, who always has snarky things to say about other people, like Elon, whenever he'll say something complimentary, but he throws a little shiv in there too, if you look closely. Oh, he said that Sam Altman is like a messiah figure, right? And if you look, 10 years ago, there was a New Yorker profile of Sam Altman where he talked about his plan at Y Combinator to build Y Combinator its own city. He has been part and parcel of these ideas from the very beginning. And I think, Altman gets a lot of negative attention. Talk about a guy who just did not belong in the public eye, right? I mean, he's become the avatar of the scary, untrustworthy AI CEO. And I mean, look at the crazy ideas he's unleashed on the world. This idea that there would be a one world AI government and we would all get a check from it. And I mean, he literally has said all these things on the record. The establishment and Democrats are all mad about leftists winning and democratic socialism. But what about the Silicon Valley weirdo socialism? We're all going to get our eyeballs scanned for crypto and get some kind of check from Sam Altman's world dominating AI company. I mean, he really puts it all out there, this weird stuff, which clearly is intended to spark investor interest in absolute monopoly over the world, but sounds insane to most people. And this is why AI is now completely on fire and sinking because of all of the marketing, the apocalypse marketing they have insisted upon imposing on themselves.
I wanted to ask, how has the tech press and even the political press allowed this to advance to this point? I feel like sometimes when we're just accurately describing what these people believe, we come off like conspiracy theorists. It's the Always Sunny meme with the guy in front of the board, with the strings going everywhere. Why am I hearing about this from you and not on the front pages of the New York Times or even a tech publication like The Verge or one of those other places?
I have often asked myself that question, and it was a real challenge while working on this to keep asking myself, why aren't they doing it? And I even asked at one point to my fellow journalist, is there some reason why we're not supposed to write about this that everyone else knows about and I don't? If there is, please tell me. I'm a rational person. I might respect whatever that reason is. But part of it, though, is that, look, some of these people did write about pieces of this early on. The New York Times in 2013 wrote about Balaji Srinivasan, the network state guy, calling for Silicon Valley to essentially secede from the United States and comparing the USA to Microsoft in terms of being an outdated software system. And, in 2021, Cade Metz wrote a piece where he had leaked versions of emails between Curtis Yarvin and Balaji Srinivasan and wrote about this emerging neo-reactionary dark enlightenment idea. Corey Pine of The Baffler did great early work. And there were a few others like that who were certainly aware of these things. But I think it was treated as an eccentric and unimportant little subculture in Silicon Valley. And for some reason, as this subculture morphed into a very dangerous force and joined forces with the Trump MAGA movement, the mainstream media outlets that were certainly aware of it and covered it completely lost interest. And I really felt when I started reporting on this in 24 that people kind of would look at me like I had three heads or something. And, when J.D. Vance got on the ticket, I realized, holy crap, he's completely in the middle of all this. Another creation of Peter Thiel. And I wrote about it, and I didn't know why most people weren't. I mean, Rachel Maddow the next week did a whole thing about that kind of thing. And for a second, the cover of my piece flashed onto the screen. But it wasn't until January of 2025, after Trump had won, that the New York Times interviews Curtis Yarvin, and Politico writes that, this guy was once considered fringe and now his ideas are mainstream in Trump's Washington. And in April of 25, the Washington Post wrote what I had written a few months before, which was that Doge was inspired by Curtis Yarvin. Yeah. And so for some reason, although it feels good to be ahead of the big dogs at these papers, they were really hesitant to go there. And I think part of it is that people fear billionaires. Another part of it is that people respect billionaires too much. And this stuff sounds kind of weird. And I think that some editors are like, we're not going to give that any credence. We're not going to give that any oxygen. But Newspaper editors don't decide reality anymore. Billionaires decide reality. And when billionaires decide that some weird shit is now going to be real, they have the power to do that. And similarly, you don't see many people in official Washington talking about it. They kind of dance around the idea that something's wrong with the oligarchs, but there is a very distinct and defined ideology here that has an idea to destroy democracy. And I hope that my book will help push some people, because I have had conversations with politicians who have reached out and who know about this stuff, but aren't going to say anything about it, that it'll make it okay to start talking about it, to start naming it.
What really unified these two movements, the Silicon Valley oligarchy and the MAGA movement? Obviously, J.D. Vance becoming the vice presidential pick as a creation of Peter Thiel. But there was a marked shift that you write about, between the first Trump administration, where we saw some tepid pushback. Mark Zuckerberg banned Trump from Facebook after the January 6th insurrection, then welcomed him back in 2023. Jeff Bezos pulled the paper's endorsement of Kamala Harris. What changed?
I think a lot of them got super, super rich and went super, super crazy. I think part of what we're witnessing is an outbreak of dangerous billionaire psychosis. But if you look at what happened over the decade preceding Trump's return to office, you had the Occupy movement, you had the Black Lives Matter movement, you had Me Too, and you had the pandemic, right? All of these were, I think, radicalizing for a certain kind of powerful man who felt that the future is slipping from their fingers and they're going to be vulnerable to cancellation or accountability, you name it. And in the pandemic, a lot of these guys, like all of us, we were all isolated, alone in our silos with our thoughts. And they were communicating, though. And I think some of them thought, this is it. This is the big change that happens. Nothing will ever be the same again. And actually, science and civil society did their thing. We mostly hung together, right? Everything did not fall apart. And these guys got even richer, by the way, because a lot of how we communicated was through technology. And I think they came out of the pandemic completely radicalized. And that's part of what happened in San Francisco. They were able to use the anger, the pent-up anger from the lockdowns, which was a big trauma for all of us, right? A global trauma. And some of us lost loved ones during that trauma, and we couldn't even go to their funerals because we had to stay apart. And they were able to channel this anger and dissatisfaction into these recall elections. And I think they thought they could now unite with Trump, who was making a comeback, to do that on a much larger scale. San Francisco was the beta test, and now they were going for the main product. And I think, part of that was just bad luck. Trump returns to power. Biden is unable to compete or campaign. They have to shove in Kamala at the last minute. She didn't really have a chance she did her best, but couldn't really pull it off. And so this terrible misfortune of Trump returning to power, I think they saw this as an opportunity. What do venture capitalists do? They bet on disruption. They bet on disruptive technologies that can return a massive profit off of an investment. And Trump is a technology for destroying democracy. There's no one else like him in our country who can do what he did, who can literally try to overthrow the government from the White House, fail, and then come back 4 years later and be the president again. And so I think they're betting on Trump to break things up to the point that they will have an easier time of getting everything they want out of this system on their way to Argentina or Greenland or space or whatever territory they plan to build their network state on. And I think they're kind of learning the hard way that maybe that wasn't the best bet to make.
Yeah, you're talking about the various places that they were looking to build these sort of trial states, and I thought of that island in Albania that the Kushners, were trying to. I think they bought it or they got permission from the government, but then Albanian citizens rose up. So that came to mind, and immediately when you were talking about this, I don't know if it's part of that project, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. But also, I know that you're saying that these guys are radicalized and in a cult, but why do they want to destroy democracy? Is it a power trip? Or is it a profit motive? In your opinion, what is the motivation there?
Well, profit motive, PROPHET. Definitely. They'll make some money too.
Yeah.
When you dig deep into it, it gets even weirder and scarier.
Okay.
Because why are they so unhappy? These are the richest people in the world. No one should be happier than they are. They are winning at our system. And by the way, capitalism is already great at exploiting the majority of people to benefit a small few. Some people get upset when I say that. They think I'm celebrating capitalism. No, I'm being snarky. Capitalism is already destructive and exploitative. They are winning the world because they already have the system that they want. But what they want is more than money. What they want is the power to control the future. And the future as they see it, and this is covered in my book, is this sort of religious idea that AI is about to fundamentally transform everything in very dramatic and unprecedented ways, including the creation of this sort of mystical boom loop, this acceleration god. Some call it the thermodynamic god in the effective accelerationist movement. And that this will unlock magical possibilities like eternal life, like multiplanetary travel, and like people merging with AI and machines. This is the bundle of ideas called TESCREAL: transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. That was from Dr. Emil Torres and Dr. Timney Gebru. They kind of categorized this weird bundle of beliefs that has become very powerful in Silicon Valley. And so the idea is they're going to create God, they're going to live forever, they're going to go to the heavens, and they're going to have a super abundant paradise where everything is taken care of by their new AI invention. This is a reworking of Christian eschatology into a tech format, right? They are creating a new religion. And the only thing standing in the way of this acceleration toward the tech billionaire as God is regulations, rules, democracy, anything that will not allow them to burn up the entire planet in pursuit of their apocalyptic capitalist vision of the future. I hope that helps.
It's very depressing.
It's like you write in the book, like this is far more than the libertarian fever dream that they usually get tagged with, right? I mean, the roots are there, but it's grown into so much more.
Yeah, I'd say that Peter Thiel stopped being a libertarian once he became a government surveillance contractor in 2003. Right. Those two things don't make sense, but all the big brains in tech journalism have continually described him as a libertarian and as a philosopher, none of which is true. Right. This guy's a pseudo-intellectual right-wing zealot, and he's a government intelligence military billionaire. He's not a libertarian, and not that libertarianism actually exists in any real form. It's sort of a juvenile fantasy of a handful of guys. But yeah, it's some pretty far gone stuff. And if you don't believe me, just Google or do some kind of search. Don't have to do Google. Peter Thiel and Antichrist, and tell me what you find. Because he's been traveling the world preaching about the Antichrist for the past year, which was great because I didn't know where was my book going to end up. When you're writing a book, I'd never written like a long form thing like that before. And it was like, there it is. Antichrist is what we're headed for. And that really tied it all together. This is a religious cult of tech supremacy.
They're also all obsessed with the Lord of the Rings. And it's making more sense to me now why they are so obsessed with Lord of the Rings. They want to be Sauron. Sauron in the books, he's the big bad, and he's obsessed with order and controlling everything and dominating everybody's free will. And it sounds like that's what these guys are. So maybe that's why, maybe they unironically just want to be Sauron.
Well, there's a lot of weird inversions when you're studying Peter Thiel. The funny thing is that they think they're the heroes for some reason of the Lord of the Rings. And Thiel gets very surly about the Palantir point, because Palantir is this all-seeing orb used by an evil wizard in the Lord of the Rings that most of us know. And Thiel named his surveillance company after this. And even the logo is based on that.
Yeah.
And Thiel would argue that, well, Aragorn later uses it to do good, right? But that's not the story most of us know. But it brings up an important point. They think they're the heroes.
Yeah.
But they're clearly the villains, not only the villains of Lord of the Rings, right? They're the ones who want to destroy creation and leave the planet, but they're also the villains of the Bible. They're the villains of science fiction. They're trying to recreate every single villainous group or character in science fiction. And they seem to be completely deluded. Or they know actually that they're the evil ones and they pretend that they don't. I'm not really sure which it is, but they're the villains of every form of literature, and it's a pretty sad state of affairs that they have attained so much wealth and power.
Yeah, and I can't let this go by. My Lord of the Rings nerdery is a frequent topic on this show, but Aragorn, when he did that, was making a self-sacrificing feint, basically, to throw Sauron off of looking for Frodo inside Mordor. And then he marches his armies out, expecting that they're all going to die, just to give Frodo a chance. And Peter Thiel would never do that. He would never expose himself to that kind of risk. So, yes, they are completely deluded if that's what they think they're doing with all of this. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, you hit on one of my special tangents.
No. There needs to be more. There could be a whole tech Lord of the Rings studies after all this stuff. You know how the fantasy series becomes a political war cry for crazy people, crazy billionaires.
Peter Thiel kind of reminds me of Donald Trump in some ways, like the Teflon, nothing sticks to him. And when we did the Sam Altman episode, to be clear, he is a very bad guy, but there is this weird strain of homophobia that he gets from some of the other oligarchs, like Elon Musk will kind of like make innuendos about him. You don't get that with Peter Thiel, right? Like, how does he kind of escape all judgment, for better and for worse?
Well, the Antichrist has magical powers because he's the son of. Just kidding.
Wait, I really thought you were serious.
No.
Listen, this is a podcast with a Pope hat in the background. So.
Well, when Peter Thiel describes the Antichrist, he does seem to be describing himself. He must be aware of that. But it's interesting. The only thing I've seen pop up is, his lover had jumped out of a window in Miami. People make a lot of that and kind of warn me that, you're going to fall out of a window too. I don't really know the full story of that. I haven't seen anything that suggests it was something that was foul play. But it is strange to see a gay billionaire pushing these very fascist ideas and lining up behind Donald Trump and an evangelical movement that is very, hateful toward LGBTQ rights. And also, just the entire way that he is kind of funding this dark vision of the future. But I think it goes to show, I don't think he identifies primarily as a sexuality. I think he identifies primarily as a billionaire. And as a man who believes he deserves total power. And it's strange to me the degree to which he is just not a normal person at all. I think it's hard to nail him down on any one thing. And it's also strange that he's going around preaching about the Antichrist and all these religious themes, because you generally wouldn't expect a gay man to be a credible messenger to the religious people he's talking to, especially the evangelicals or whatever, who would consider him to be, headed for hell in the end. But he somehow seems to have a reality distortion shield where that doesn't really work on him. I would also note that he gave money to Gavin Newsom's gubernatorial campaign in 2018, right? Yeah. Newsom was largely the one who pushed gay marriage into the center as mayor of San Francisco. And, Peter Thiel's married to a man. So there are a lot of contradictions. And when you start looking at Thiel, you just find a lot of weird contradictions that don't make a lot of sense. But for him, they don't have to. He doesn't. He's warning that the Antichrist will warn about apocalyptic ideas and seek to gain control through technology. And then that's exactly what he's doing. So it's hard to figure out.
You've faced some, I don't know if consequences is the right word, but you've had some issues with your social media accounts, right? Since this book has been in the process. So, what happened to your Twitter account?
I was one of the journalists banned when Musk first bought Twitter, and I wasn't even working on a book then, but I had was working on my series of the Network State stuff, and I was banned then I didn't even break any rules. It was for no reason. Yeah. And I was off of there for 8 months until I finally figured out a way to get myself back on. I won't say exactly how I did it, but then I was on until April 20th. I was banned permanently for tweeting that the Palantir manifesto that had been published was fascism. And that was all I tweeted, TLDR fascism. And boop, next day I'm out. And even before that, though, in last year, people kept telling me that when they would post links to my newsletter on Facebook, it would get taken down immediately. And I thought, I didn't believe it at first, but enough people kept telling me this. And so I thought I must have a problem with my website because I'd set it up myself. There must be something off. I had a web guy look at it. He said it was fine. So I finally went to Meta Support, and this Meta customer service person said, yeah, you write about things like the network state and you criticize tech moguls. So that's being flagged as sensitive and not permitted on Facebook. And I was like,
Oy.
what?
Oh my
And
God.
I got some publicity for that because I made those screenshots public, and Facebook backed off and said that the customer service rep had it wrong and shouldn't have said those things. But whatever he was looking at, Ray, I'm sorry if they fired you, was telling him that. Right, he clearly didn't come up with that stuff on his own. So they backed off of that. But over the past 2 weeks, YouTube has been threatening to take down my channel, where I have a podcast with about 28,000 subscribers, because someone has launched a full-scale campaign to file constant copyright strikes against my channel. After a year and a half of being on YouTube with like 0 issues, I didn't even know this kind of thing was possible. I've since learned you can pay a few $1,000s and some team will go to work just filing these copyright strikes. And unless you're a big account, YouTube's solution is just to delete you. And so I went out there and dramatized it, publicized it. I wrote to Google Comms and said, I'm going to totally make hay out of this. This is a big mistake. And if you want to avert that, please have someone look into what's happening here. It's really clear that I'm not getting multiple copyright strikes every day from different Outlook email addresses. That's not organic, right? Anyway, the good news is that it appears YouTube is backing off, and they have removed all the fake copyright strikes. My poor producer has been doing this nonstop for 2 weeks, pushing back on these things. And I won't believe it till I see it. If we make it through Saturday without getting taken down, I'm supposing that YouTube is backed off. But they sent me an email saying, you are scheduled for deletion in 1 week. And they have not retracted that.
Wow.
But I've heard from others that they're aware. Some reporters called them and that they're not going to do it. So we'll see. If they do it, thanks a lot. It's going to be great publicity. I'm going to make hay out of it. But I would rather just keep my channel and do my podcast, free speech, USA, all that, you know.
Well, we also are on YouTube. So, if we have any issues, we will certainly let you know out of this episode. I hope not, but you never know.
It'd be great for the episode. We could really make hay out of it. So please, whoever's doing that, please keep doing it. Just kidding.
What's the name of your podcast? So our listeners can
The Nerd Reich podcast.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
What a great name, by the way.
I didn't come up with it. When I started writing about these guys for the New Republic, I had a story that went super viral, and I was under attack for 2 days from all these weird blue check trolls and this gazillionaire, Balaji Srinivasan. And someone reached out to me from the crypto world and said, we've been calling these guys the Nerd Reich for years. And I was like, immediate URL search, nobody had it. And I just started going.
Excellent.
So I rebranded as the Nerd Reich immediately, and here we are.
You talk about potential solutions, presuming those would need to be systemic and also involve Democrats. So I guess this is like a 2-pronged question, because you said the only people who love billionaires as much as Republicans are Democrats. So what do Democrats need to do to stop this madness? And then on an individual level, what can we do? We did an episode with Megan Greenwell. She wrote a really excellent book called Bad Company, Private Equity and Death of the American Dream. And it really highlighted the tensions between, if you're going to try to buy something you need for your family, are you going to buy it from the evil Amazon or the evil Target or the evil Walmart? And it just, people are so constrained right now by these billionaires. So systemically and individually, what can we do?
Systemically and individually, we need to start talking about what's happening. We need to tell the people we know, tell our friends and family that the billionaires have a very strange idea. They've been spelling it out in public for decades, and they are now executing on it. Because that kind of knowledge is power, and we can't really respond if we don't know what's going on. And that's what I'm trying to do with my book, is make politicians talk about it, make other journalists talk about it, and make sure we're aware, because the solutions are going to come out of the awareness of what the actual problem is. So that's step one. And you can help by buying the book, which will keep me in the fight.
Link will be in the description, by the way.
Yes.
Great. Beyond that, I think we already see some of the solution emerging from the grassroots. The protests against data centers are bipartisan, and it's people who aren't normally activists defending their community from this alien invasion that seeks to suck up their air and water and poison their communities and take up the land in order to create a technology that will allegedly kill their jobs and possibly wipe humanity off the face of the planet. I mean, what's not to love? And people who are not activists are becoming activated by that fight. In addition, we see campaigns like Purge Palantir, which is seeking to raise awareness and the need to get Palantir out of our government, to get these private surveillance corporations out of our lives, and Deflock and other anti-flock campaigns to push against all the cities that are just willy-nilly adopting total surveillance as a model for revenue and public safety. So we do see people rising up in individual ways that are systemic. And the other thing that gives me hope is young people. Young people, I have young people in my family who I talk to, and I'm always interested to see what they know and what they think. They're completely different than my generation was. I don't even know where they get their news. They're somehow all connected to the same sources. But for a couple of years now, one of the young people in my family has been saying that's AI for anything that's fake or detestable. And I read something recently that they're all doing that. Kids say that's AI. AI is a pejorative for a lot of young people. I think part of the answer is going to come from this younger generation, because they're the ones being told they have no future. They're the ones being told there'll be no more creativity or space for human activity and productivity in the future, because everything is going to be erased with AI. They're the ones who are going to inherit a completely destroyed planet beyond any hope of salvation if we don't get off the track that we have been on. I have some ideas for solutions. One of them is that we can have billionaires or we can have democracy. We cannot have both. But I think the last thing the world needs is another man telling everybody what we should do. My job is to tell people what's happening and point to the culprits and their ideas. But I think the young people in the world today are going to have to be the ones who lead the change. The world I enjoyed so far was one they'll never have, where I got out of college, I had jobs, I was expected to make a lot of money and retire at some point. So the billionaires have become radicalized, and it's time for the young people and everyone else to become radicalized as well. The billionaires want to monopolize the future, and we have to use our own power of imagination to fight them and to defeat them, and to make it clear that if the billionaires are going to imagine a future without us, then we're going to imagine a future without them.
That's powerful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Where can our listeners keep up with your work?
I'm at thenerdreich.com newsletter. It's free to read. The Nerd Reich podcast on YouTube and all other platforms. And I'm on Blue Sky and Mastodon. And weirdly, my Instagram has been blowing up. The surest sign that my book is doing okay. I've gained 9,000 new followers in the last week, which is funny. I've been on there forever. I Instagram like an old guy, like occasionally, here's a meal I ate. Here's a tree I saw, and now it's like, just every time I look, that little orange thing with all so I'm doing more on Instagram now as well.
Okay, great. Well, Gil, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I couldn't encourage our listeners with more vigor to go and buy your book, which again, link will be in the description. And thank you for coming on the pod.
Thanks for calling me before the New York Times did. So.
Oh my God, what a win!
You heard it first here on Cancel Me Daddy.
We are OG New York Times haters over here, so that's great.
So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, Christine, that was really disturbing stuff, actually.
It was. I'm glad that Gil left us on a hopeful note.
I'm depressed. I'm going to go stress eat some tuna noodle casserole over here.
I think he gave us some ideas, and I like that the individual and the systemic solutions are one and the same. That's comforting to me.
I liked that he hit on so many points that we've covered before, and I'm actually going to make a new playlist on YouTube for folks, which covers all of our previous coverage of these guys, so people can go back and watch and listen. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're hearing or watching us on. And also, if you would like us every week, we are now doing, or we have been doing for a while, a bonus episode on our off weeks. So whenever there's not a main episode, there is a bonus episode, and you can find those on our Patreon, patreon.com/CastleMeDaddy, and also on Apple memberships, where we've seen some pretty good growth over there, and we really appreciate it. So if you want more of us, it's Christine and I riffing. We always have some fun. It's a little bit more relaxed over there. And that's where we're doing our out of cancellations now.
That's like it's like where your fun, smart friends are having coffee or just hanging out.
Anyway, here is a quick sample from our next episode.
I actually came across this organically. My Instagram feed, which is usually, pestilence and filth, actually served up wholesome content of a woman taking control of her reproductive decisions.
And boy, did that make people mad.
Oh, it made them so mad.
I think the one I saw was our favorite Christo-fascist.
Matt Walsh.
Matt Walsh, that fucker. Okay.
That was a deep cut.
Matt Walsh was like, back in my day, and I'm like, bro, you're younger than I am. Shut the fuck up. Back in my day, somebody of AOC's age would already have 4 kids and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dude, shut up. Just shut up. It's not your business. Okay?
Yeah.
You're a mediocre white man. You're a subpar white man from Tennessee. Okay? What a representative from the fucking New York City does with her own body is none of your goddamn business, buddy.
The decision did go back to the states, I heard, Kate.
That's not really what they believe, though.
I know.
They only did that so that they could ban it in their own states first. But
and then
we both
ban it
know that
everywhere.
they never wanted it to be decided at the states.
No. And then for all of their talk about growing families, IVF has always been a real thorn in their side.
Yeah, because they think fertilized embryos are people, and the IVF treatment ends up killing a lot of embryos. So, getting sidetracked a little bit, but of course that's what we do in these segments. And that's the beauty of these segments. But my favorite, gotcha with anti-abortion people is to always go, okay, you're in an IVF facility.
Oh, I've heard this one, yeah.
And it's on fire. And there's a screaming baby in one room and a tray with 1 million fertilized embryos in the other, and you could only save one of them. What are you choosing? Kids Love Me Daddy is a Flytrap Media production. Today's show was made by me, Caitlin Burns, and my incredible co-host, Christine Grimaldi, along with our editor, May Schultz.
T. Peter Schmidt made our theme song, and Romy Chirico designed our graphics. Transcriptions by Heather Langefeld. Our thumbnails are made by Celine Vale. Ads by Multitude Productions.
Our show is made possible by the incredible cancelers supporting our work, especially the members of our Canceler Hall of Fame, with the great power to cancel all of their enemies. Meg.
We appreciate your support.
Happy canceling.
Yay.